Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Those Two Geeks. He's Alex, I'm Joe, and yes, there's a third today. We are joined by author and writer Frank Martin and Brave Soul because he has no idea what he's got himself into.
Yeah, we're going to have to
And
rename it the Three Geeks today.
yes, Three Geeks. Geeks. Oh man, I was too early to do math. I was trying to come up with a quippy math quote, but nope.
No.
But
Well,
anyways, Frank,
you're out late
thank you for
too,
your
so
time.
we're good.
I was. That's no excuse, though. Be prepared. So, Frank, thank you for your time. Thank you for joining us. It's always a pleasure to meet new faces and hear new voices. And it's really cool that, Alex and I aren't just whistling into the wind. So, thank you for coming on. And I'm sure there's a host of things you'd like to talk about. So, you said it, Three Geeks. You got the con today. You lead us. We're just going with you.
Just going with me?
Yeah, we're here
That's
for the
a lot of pressure. If
No
I wanted to host, I
pressure
would
at all.
start my own show.
No pressure at all. No pressure at all. No.
Sure. I mean, the big thing in my life right now is my next Kickstarter launch, which is for my series called Grim Space. I'm putting a lot of work into it. It's a sci-fi fairy tale mashup series. So basically what I do is I take fairy and folk tales, and I'm kind of expanding that into all public domain characters, and I reimagine them in like a Star Wars-esque universe. And so the first issue was Jack and the Beanstalk. I did that 2 years ago. Last year was Pinocchio. This year I'm doing a little-known story, a fairy tale called The Golden Bird. But I have a lot planned for it. I do 6 Kickstarter launches a year. Next year is going to be all Grim Space. So yeah, I'm putting a lot into this universe, and it's a shared universe. So it's characters cross over into other stories, and there's plot threads that weave through them all, and there's going to be crossovers and tie-in events and stuff. So it's going to be a lot of fun.
Well, that's all the rage these days, right? Shared universes, multiverses, and it makes sense because there's so many story paths you can go with a format like that. You don't want to confine yourself to just kind of one simple small pocket of a universe that there's really no room for growth. So
what I did, my very first series was called Modern Testament, and it was essentially an anthology series that focused on biblical beings like angels, demons, horsemen of the apocalypse, Ghost Rider, Constantine type stuff. And what I did is I took those characters and I placed them into the modern world. And it's an anthology series, so it's full of a whole bunch of short stories, but they weren't interconnected. They weren't part of a universe. And I did that because I didn't want to look at the big picture, right? I wanted to take each character and give them their due without worrying about, is this going to conflict with this? And how does this tie in with this? I just wanted to focus on the characters, which was fun. It was great. People loved it. But a common complaint, I don't know if it was a complaint, but maybe a wish. A lot of readers were saying, I would love this if these characters interacted with each other. And I'm like, that's not the series. That's not what I'm doing.
That's not the point of what I'm doing right now. Yeah.
So it's cool to revisit that concept of focusing on individual tales and weaving them all together and seeing how they all interact and how the pieces come together as a puzzle. So it's fun to finally give people what they were nagging me about earlier.
So would you say that you were a big Mother Goose and Grimm fan? I mean, hence the term Grimm Space, like in also the anthology style?
Not really.
No, just sounded cool.
It's you know what it is? I'm a story fan, and there's something about fairy tales in that they exist in so many different cultures and so many different places have their own spin on them. So that those core characters, those core plot lines transcend the specific fairy tales that we all know and love. So to take that framework and apply it and kind of retool it for something completely new and different and something like Star Wars universe that is very big and a lot of fans are familiar with it, to place something familiar in an already familiar setting, I think it's resonating with people, and I'm having fun doing it.
And it's so vast because you have if you use the Star Wars analogy, it's something so vast that you have the ability to hop around and, pick at different pockets of that universe. The one thing I do like, for all the complaints that the Disney Plus series get, from every fan alive, because fans are fickle. I like the idea that it's not a linear tale with Star Wars. It's not like this comes after Jedi, this comes, like, they jump back and forth and to and fro. Like, they just, wherever they want to tell the story next, they leap to, and then you can always watch it in succession from the beginning. Like, I've always liked the idea that you can just kind of hop in wherever you want, and then if you want to go back and catch up, you can. I mean, that's
I
kind of how all of us did as comic book readers, right? We all, unless you were born for Action Comics #1, you all came in somewhere in the middle, or somewhere in, the very, very near end of a series, and then you worked your way backwards and, fell in love with the property.
I wrote an article recently. It was about revivals, and I was talking about Dexter and Picard. So they did a revival of Dexter, which was like, okay, we're gonna get all these actors and they're older and they're gonna come back and they're
Yeah.
gonna revive the story. Whereas you take something like Picard or Kenobi, it's not like we're telling the next chapter of these characters' lives, because we have stories far in the future that are already done after these characters are dead. So it's
Right.
not like we're reviving these characters. We're simply just telling another story in this character's already fleshed out life.
Right.
Which I think is a different way to look at it. And it's pretty cool, that we see, I'm having a brain fart. Patrick Stewart, who plays Picard.
Yep.
He was young, and we saw him as a young captain in Next Generation. Now he's older, and he's just playing the character at an older period of his life that is already ended within the timeline of Star Trek. So it's so cool how they're able to do that.
It's funny because that works a lot in not just comic books, but TV and books in general, in any medium. I've always, I don't know who else on the call, Alex, I don't even know if you were. I've always been a massive fan of the show The Sopranos, and I loved and adored that show. And when it aired, I remember the day that the finale came on, and everyone thought their TV fritzed at the same exact moment because the finale ended in such an abrupt way that everyone had their theories and all this and that. And it went on for like a couple of years. People were talking about their theories. And then David Chase, the front runner of the show, came out and he was like, no. He's like, everyone, that's great that everyone has this grandiose end for Tony and his family. But really what it basically was I was telling you a story. You got to look into the window of this world, and then the window closed. And that's it. That's what you saw. And I'd always thought that was like an artsy fartsy way to put it. Like, oh, what a cop out. But if you think about it, these characters are living, breathing flesh, because of all the care put into them. We really do get nothing more than just a glimpse into the window at a time of whatever we're viewing. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, we don't see everything. We don't see Tony Soprano on the crapper.
No, there's a lot of exposition you don't see. Like, my dad used to always joke, like, it's funny that, if you go back to any sitcom in the 60s and 70s or whatever, like, no one ever went to the bathroom. It wasn't until like Al Bundy came around and like you heard the toilet flush for the first time on TV, really, because they made it such an integral part of Married with Children, which is a great show. But like, you never heard like Fever.
I'd never thought of that, honestly. That you
right?
the TV. Yeah, I never thought about. I don't remember where.
Have me, Alex.
I'm so happy. Like, I'd never thought of where I had first heard the toilet flush when I was back home. Like, I'm assuming it was on Only Fools and Horses, but again,
I don't know what that is.
I would highly recommend looking it up. It's a classic British TV show, but I would not bother watching. Like, there's 3 Christmas specials that they told. I think it was either over a year or over 3 years. I can't remember what it was anymore.
Yeah.
And then just don't watch anymore because they revived it and ruined the ending. So don't worry about going back to it. But yeah, it's about 2 brothers in London who are trying to make it rich, and the entire like 22 seasons is about them trying to make it rich.
22 seasons. Whew,
that's a lot
of work.
Yeah, but bear in mind that there's 22 seasons, but it's a British show, so most seasons are about 6 episodes long.
Okay, all right.
Cheaters, they're not The Simpsons.
No, exactly.
Yeah, no. There's not 24 episodes.
However, every single episode bar the last one's are really good.
All right.
Going back
Like,
to endings, I mean, as a writer,
yeah,
I so appreciate that mindset. I have a lot of stories that I wouldn't say they don't end abruptly, but I
okay,
love having the reader think about things when the story's over. You know, I want these
yeah,
characters to stay with the reader after the final page. And I have a
sure.
lot of people coming back to my work and they said, Frank, what happens after that? And I go, I don't know. I ended the story. You figure it
Right.
out.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
So
This
I
is a,
love doing that. I love having these
yeah.
characters stay with people afterwards and they want a follow-up. And I'm like, no, like I
Well,
ended it there for a reason. If you want to continue this person's story, have a head canon. Figure it out yourself. Like
I love that. I love how you're using terminology like headcanon and things like that because we all do it. Everyone does it. We've all fanficked everything to death, especially something that we're super, super involved in, something near and dear to our heart. But you said something, I consider myself a writer myself, and I mean, I've got nothing but but short stories and endless things that I've wanted to do for like scripts and stuff. And then just the problem is, I have ADD with writing. So like I tend to just move on. But I am a very appreciative, like even if I write anything like a speech or whatever, I'm very curious on how you write because I don't write in a linear fashion. I don't know how to do that. Like I will have a thought hit me and it's usually somewhere in the middle or it's like a poignant quote or something that I'm like, yeah, that's the thing that I want to emphasize the most. And then I framework and like weave it around it. And a lot of people don't do that. A lot of people write line for line, like, hi, this is the beginning of the story. This is what, and they just write it down as it goes with the paragraph. I can't do that. I come up with thoughts and ideas of something that is I want to emphasize and illustrate and it's poignant and then I dovetail everything around it and make sure at the end it's some kind of a cohesive thought and just not this big run-on sentence that's a brain fart. But like I'm curious as a writer, how do you write?
there's no one right way to write
Right.
or to do things. I've done both, and the truth is that inspiration is a fickle, flimsy thing that
Mm-hmm.
you can't take for granted. You know, when
No.
something hits you, you got to capitalize
Yeah.
in that moment because if it's gone, you're not getting it back.
No, and it always like you reinvent it and revamp it, like you'll have the most brilliant thought, which is why notepads, anything like that, like um, Microsoft Note or whatever, is imperative because if something hits you that it's just like, I'm sure this happens with comedians, and that they're like, oh shoot, that's a great joke. Like I need to write that down right now and get it out of my head because I know if I wait till I get to the hotel, it's going to, transform into something a little bit different and might lose the impact of what I originally thought.
Yeah, I one of my greatest writing tools, and I told my wife I wanted this. I think she got it for Father's Day or something.
Hmm.
She's like, "What do you want?" I said, "I want a waterproof notepad." She goes, "What?"
Wow,
And
I
I
didn't
was
even
like,
know
"I
this
don't know
existed.
if they exist, but I want to be able to write in the shower." So,
Yeah, absolutely.
so they actually do make them. They're tiny notepads. They have
No
suction
kidding.
cups to go on the tile, and they come with a
Oh,
pencil. And I just jot down notes and dialogue when I'm in the shower.
absolutely.
And it's scribbles, so she gets in there and she's
Right.
like, "I have no idea what you wrote," and I'm like, half the time I don't know what I wrote,
You
but
know,
it's down there, and figuring it
so
out is to have the fun.
when I sign for anything, like anything, everyone's like, "Oh, you're a doctor." I'm like, "No." They're like, "What in the ass is your signature?" I'm like, "Listen, I write like that." And I just joke. I'm like, it's protection. It's like it's code. I know and you don't. No, the truth is, I'll write it down and go, what is that freaking word amongst that scribble? I don't know. And it's just, I write like chicken scratch. I can't help it. It's just the
I
way it
can
is. Thank
confirm
God for
this. I've seen his writing.
oh, my writing's abysmal. So like thank God for, digital anything because I've had so many people that I write these great cards. They'll call me and they'll be like, "What was that word? What was that word? What was that word?" I'm like, "Yeah, I should transcribe it. I'm sorry."
I had to learn when I went to school for it was like an architecture class, I think, and they
Hmm.
taught us how to write like an architect and like really finely print. I don't do that
Yeah,
anymore, but I can. And the handwriting I have now is still influenced by that, so it's still somewhat legible
yeah.
to most people. Uh, when I'm taking my time, which I very seldom am. So if I
Hmm.
open the notebook I have by my desk my desk right now, I can read half of what I've written.
Yeah.
And
I'm a big voice to text guy now.
There you go.
Especially when I need to do like a long article or a letter
Mhm.
or something, I'll just whip out my phone and just have verbal diarrhea into it, and it's just it's so easy, especially for someone who spends a lot of time putting out words. It's just so annoying to type or to write.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I completely concur with that. And you have a really where are you from, Frank?
I am outside New York City. I'm in the
Okay,
suburbs.
you're from New York City, but you don't sound like a New Yorker.
You
You
know
know what I
what?
mean?
I've been on shows before, and they're like, Frank, you have such a New York accent, and then
I was
people
gonna
go,
say,
No,
Joe,
you
I don't know,
don't have
literally
any
like, I
accent.
don't
I'm
know
like,
don't.
I
what
don't
you're
know.
hearing, but I can hear New York in Frank.
I can't. I can't. And like I have cousins from New York, and now Frank, I'm from Massachusetts, and specifically like 20 minutes outside Boston. And when we before we got out of the before I got on the show with you guys today, Alex was like, "Wow, I can tell you're tired because yeah, see, it's right there, tired. Damn,
Yeah.
I
I
have
was
trained that out of me for business for so long because I used to work in finance years ago, and I would have people on the phone like, "Wow, you sound funny. You sound like a cartoon character." They'd sound like they're from the Panhandle or Yosemite Sam, but really, the Boston accent, if it's cringe. Like I love Boston movies, like The Departed and all that stuff. But when you watch it, you're like, oh my god, we sound like that. It's brutal. Now New York is not much far off, so it's like please don't like peacock around. You guys got it pretty bad too. So what I'm saying is, you sound very professional. I would put you in like not the. I don't know where I'd put you. Like that's why I was getting so
I
curious
don't
because
I
you don't
don't
seem
think
to have
that
a
much
very
about
impactful
it.
accent.
I open my mouth and words come out. I don't.
Yeah,
Not that good at hiding or showing an accent. The only accent, I mean, I think all accents are funny, just as a matter of principle.
Oh
But
yeah, Alex
but
has a
the
great
only
accent.
one that drives me insane are Scottish accents. I have no idea what
Really?
you're saying.
Yeah.
Oh,
That's interesting.
thick Scottish accents
Yeah,
can
a
be almost
thick one.
impossible to understand.
I'm like, I don't know what you're saying. Like, I hear a word every once in a while, and then I hear a word that I think I know what it is, but I
Yeah.
don't know what it means. Like,
Yeah, because there are words that, well, I mean, I say we in Britain, but the words we use and they're not even in context. You have no idea what that means because it sounds so out of place.
yeah,
But you
so
guys make everything present so well. Like seriously. I mean, the
There,
British accent is such a great accent. Like I kill for that
there's a
accent.
reason that I'm the I do all the audio training at work.
I would
They're
assume
like, hey,
so.
can you record this? I'm like, yeah. Like you guys know that we have a UK office, right? But apparently I'm the only one that knows how to edit
Yeah.
like the stuff afterwards. So when I send it over, it's already done. It makes their life easier.
Right.
Whereas in my mind, I'm like, I just don't want to send you something that's shit. So
Yeah.
I'm gonna
Absolutely.
take a bit of time to make it sound somewhat decent, which is more than anyone else does when they send it over. So
Right. Right.
as a writer, one of my downfalls is trying to display dialect as
Mm.
comic dialogue. I can't pull it off. For some reason, whenever I try to display a dialogue in or a dialect or an accent in someone's dialogue, it just
No.
it comes off weird or forced. So
Okay.
or like, you know what the greatest thing to do is defer to somebody else, ask somebody
Yeah.
else's opinion, which
I was
is
gonna
is
say
great
just
about
have
making
all the
comics.
characters speak one uniform language. The end. They're all from the same region, but different. The biggest, vast universe you've ever seen. They
Well, you
all
know what? You
happen to
in
speak it.
comics, you can get away with that a little bit
Yeah.
by changing word balloons and fonts.
Yeah.
So
Absolutely.
even though you're not changing the words themselves, in the reader's mind as they're reading, it's like they're hearing something different, even
It's
though it's the same language.
it's very true because I never noticed that practice until I'm a big superhero guy. Alex is too. I'm DC Marvel, all in between. And I never noticed that practice being used more until the new 52 came around and they started giving like a character like the Joker his own style of word balloon so that it was just different than everyone else. And it really does affect how you read in your head and how you would construct the voice for that character. And it's a great tool because You know, otherwise it gets kind of lost in translation if everyone has the same thought balloon. And I think that's a great practice. I really, really do.
I letter my own work, which
Nice.
I do love, but I don't consider myself a designer. So I'm always, whenever I'm reading a big two book and I see the care that they take into those personalized balloons
Yeah.
and stuff, I have a lot of appreciation for it because I try to do it myself and I do it to some degree. But when you have like so many different, I'll give you a great example.
Hmm.
DC's Metal, when they had
Yes.
the Dark Knights, all the Batmen from
Yep.
different universes, they all had different word balloons,
Yes.
all of their style, and sometimes they're on the same page talking with each other. And I'm like,
Right.
that looks so tedious to do as a letterer to change every
Right.
person's fonts and balloons. So it was pretty cool to see, and I
But it's
had
an
an
effective
appreciation for that.
storytelling piece. Yeah.
Yeah, unless you do stuff like that yourself, unless you know the ins and outs of a certain
Hmm.
practice, it's hard to know the appreciation for what they do. I never thought that way before I started lettering. I'm just like, oh, they look differently. I never thought about what goes into actually doing that.
Right. Now, when did you start? Like, were you writing as a kid? Was this always a passion? Was this something that, you just knew you were going to do? Or did it come to you over time? Like,
It was something I always loved to do.
hmm
So I remember in elementary school, they give all kids like creative writing assignments. Like, what
of
did you do
course.
this
Yes.
weekend? Right? And I did that and I just never stopped. I enjoyed it.
Yeah.
I enjoyed all the media I consumed, the comics and the
Hmm.
cartoons. And like we were talking about headcanon and fan fiction, I wrote fan
Yep.
fiction at the wazoo. So everybody has the way they want stories to end.
Absolutely.
And
Yes.
I was a huge Halo fan and Metal Gear Solid fan, and
Okay.
I wrote like my version of Halo 3 before Halo 3 came out, and so
Hmm.
I posted on fanfiction.net. All of the stuff I've written is for free online,
Hmm.
and I have to put like a disclaimer at the top, like I wrote this before Halo 3 came out. This is how I would envision the series ending,
Yeah.
because it kind of becomes a moot point once the sequel comes out that completely eradicates everything that you did. But yeah, I tried to jump on that and do stuff like that, and then I did stuff like I'm doing with Grimspace. So, for
Hmm.
instance, I'm a huge fan of the Mortal Kombat mythos.
Oh, I
So what
love
I
Mortal
did is
Kombat.
I took their storyline and their mythology and their characters, and I
Hmm.
basically transformed it to taking place as like a gang war in New York City.
Yeah.
And so, just like that, just not even continuing the characters, but using the spirit of what they represent in a
Yeah.
different setting, telling them a different way. I just love the challenge and the fun that comes with toying with them around.
Yeah, and I like the phrase that people have coined, like playing with the toys in the sandbox, because that's kind of what these guys are. They're all imaginary toys that if they exist in an IP, they're imaginary toys that people can construct their new and different stories for, and albeit people do it professionally and they get licensed and they're allowed to, but you are seeing things like IPs becoming public, like Mickey. People can use Mickey Mouse in whatever scenario they want. So you're getting like Doom video games with Mickey Mouse now. You know what I mean? Like
Oh, I have a
people are.
Grimspace Steamboat Willie coming out later this year.
There you go.
I
Yeah. So
jumped on
like
that train right away.
exactly. So like you got that, and like I think it's in 2040 or maybe 2045. Batman goes public. Now
I think Superman's
that's
coming first.
okay. So Superman. Once Batman goes, that's the one I'm just gonna freaking go wild with and see
Yeah.
what I can do.
It's
But
tricky though. You have to, because it's the specific version
yes, yes,
that
yes, yes,
first
yes, yes,
appeared. So you have to
yes.
but still, people are creative. They can
Right.
find awesome ways to
And
utilize these characters.
I think it also speaks to the nature of people's fandom sometimes, that let's just face it, sometimes what we read isn't the greatest quality and we can make a better story. Like, to give you an example, I love storytelling in every single medium possible, even, like an operatic medium where it's like theatrical. I'm a diehard wrestling fan. That's just the best way I can put it. Diehard wrestling fan. I've loved it since I saw Hulk Hogan slam Andre the Giant at WrestleMania 3 when I was like 4. I was watching it on TV. I just loved it. It's it's one of those things that you watch it, it's week to week, it has no off season, it's always continuum. And the thing about it is, me and my friend Alex and I will do this too. We'll do this every month. That the stories leading to a pay per view will be like, okay, so here's what our prediction we think is going to happen. And I'll tell you, sometimes our stuff is so much better than what you see on TV. Or you get disappointed. You're like, damn, I wish they went my route, But like, it's always continuing. It's always
It's
changing. It's always in
it's
flux.
hard to do wrestling because
Very
there's no off time. It's a continuous
right.
story.
Yeah, they don't have
It's
any
hard to
down.
be that right and that on and that perfect day
Yeah.
in and day out.
Well, it's essentially Days of Our Lives, but in tights and inside ropes. That's really what it is. But the thing is, if you are a wrestling fan, we're living in a renaissance era now, because it has just been full cylinder every week for the past 2 to 3 years, just nonstop. It's been fantastic. Like, I gobble it up. I just like this, as a wrestling fan, this is what you want to see. As a comic book fan, this is what you would want to see. But teams ebb and flow and come and go, and it's like, let's face it, I love so many things. Like, Spider-Man's a big near and dear to my heart, but man, has Spider-Man been bad. It has been wretchedly bad since Zeb Wells has been on for a long while. But then they have Ultimate Spider-Man, which they've rebooted the Ultimate Universe, and that is just fabulous. It's absolutely like brand new, brilliant storytelling, and it's just like sucks you in. And that's what makes all this stuff. That's what makes what you do so, you know, it's just so enjoyable, is that it's immersive, it's involving. Even if you do it right, you create something special that, like you said, hey, when I close the book on whatever you just wrote, my brain's still going, well, what happens next? Like, well, maybe in the future, this is what they have. And you create like, because you love it. It's very hard pressed when you put down a book when, it's disappointing when you put down a comic book and you're just like, man, I'm glad that's it. Thank God it was only 12 issues. Like,
Comics are weird, especially big two comics. To go back to the playing with toys in the sandbox, I was a huge comic fan like everybody else, and I loved these characters. And when something bad happened, I was kind of like pissed off. I'm like, this is not great writing. And
right, absolutely.
And when I started really viewing it as just the writers are just kids playing with these action figures, and they put them in the toy box, and then I'm just like, okay, it's all right. Let this guy play with his toys. I don't like the way he's playing with his toys, but somebody else is going to play with them at some point anyway. And the way I always bring up this character's arc is Dr. Octopus, because
I love Doc Ock.
He had one of the most incredible arcs I had.
Superior Spider-Man, the best Spider-Man run, period.
Yeah, it was why. So even before that, he went from his standard little fat guy with glasses look.
Yeah.
And then he transformed into this crippled who like couldn't move. He was on his deathbed. And then he went to Superior Spider-Man. Then he was a robot. Then he was Superior Octopus. Then he was back to Superior Spider-Man. And where does he wind up at the end of this? He's back to the fat guy with glasses. Like, it's just the status quo. At some point, he was played with. He was thrown in the mud. He was thrown against a wall. His hair was ripped. And then he went back in the box. And somebody took him out. He was brand new again. Start from scratch. So, like, once you have that mindset to these characters that are timeless, it becomes easier to swallow.
Yeah. And now I hear the New York accent. I heard I was like, oh, there it is.
There it is.
But no, it's funny you put that analogy, because like I'm an action figure aficionado. Alex will tell you, it's hard for us to find somebody who collects more than me.
I've literally been sat here playing with a New Adventures of He-Man figure while we've been.
There you go.
So,
but like, I can remember, Frank, as a kid, being in a true literal sandbox with my superpowers, and kids would come along, and back then, before we had shared universes and grandiose ideas, they would like grab their Ninja Turtles, which I'm a big fan of too, but I didn't mix the two. I was like, Batman belongs with Batman and the Turtles belong with the Turtles. And somebody at school would be like, hey man, what if Leonardo comes with Batman? I'm like, no, what are you, crazy? They don't exist in Gotham City. Like, it's just wrong. And now I'm like, I just stifled that young kid's creativity when I think back at it. Maybe it turned him away from comic books.
And that
But
young
we
boy,
all-
James Tinian.
Yeah, right. But no,
You know what?
it's just
The Batman Turtles stories were very good. I thought they were good. They
oh,
were
so good with Freddie Williams. They were really
Yeah,
good.
they're brilliant. They're absolutely
they're
brilliant.
they're all, you know what? All of these weird crossovers that they're doing are pretty
They're
good.
great.
The Power Rangers Justice League
That was good.
fun.
Yeah.
They got Godzilla fighting who knows what. I think they just announced Aliens versus Power Rangers, or not
Yeah.
Power Rangers, Avengers.
Avengers. Now I'm an '80s baby, so like all this stuff, slap it in a sandwich, and it works. I mean, it just works. You can take Avengers versus Power Rangers. You could take Aliens. Obviously, Predator is one that's been done forever, but you could take the Turtles and basically mash them with anything. I found nothing doesn't go with them yet. I haven't seen anything that anyone's done in a publication that I'm like, that doesn't work. No,
Yeah.
Ghostbusters and Turtles, everything works so far.
Well,
Everything.
the Turtles, because each one of them encapsulates a different personality and
Mhm.
storytelling type, that you can focus any property and assign them to any one of the turtles and
Yeah.
build a story around that. You know, Raph and Batman went great together.
Yes.
Mikey and Deadpool could go great together. You know,
Oh, that
so
would be amazing. Yeah.
yeah. So there's you just find ways to pair these versatile characters with so many different properties, and you could tell a compelling story.
Yeah. The one I used to fanfic was the Turtles and the Fantastic Four because you just have your branch offs. You have, Leo with you would have Leo with Thing. You'd have Mikey with the Human Torch. You'd have Donnie with Reed Richards, obviously. And then Raph, I don't know how he'd mix. Well, Raph would be with the Thing, and then I don't know how Leo would mix with Sue Storm, but it would just be a little bit of an
Yeah,
offshoot.
that's split. Let Splinter take the hot invisible chick.
Yeah, because like definitely Donnie and Reed Richards, there's so much meat on the bone there, and Raph and the Thing,
Well,
there's just so much meat on the bone there.
it's also the family aspect of it. You know,
Mm-hmm.
turtles are a family, so if they're interacting with the Justice League, it's like, okay, are they a family? Not really. They're a bunch of superhero
No.
people but the
Yeah.
Fantastic Four are a family. So there's, yeah, like you said, there's a lot of meat on the bone there to chew on.
Like, and Alex, I'll let you. I'm sorry if I'm cutting you off.
No, that's fine. That's fine. I was
but-
just
Oh, sorry.
no. Did either of you read the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles and Stranger Things crossover?
I haven't read that yet. I've seen the toys in the
I've
store.
read like the first issue. It that also is really good for the same reason that you're saying, Joe. Right? Like the Turtles go with anything, and what I always
especially anything 80s.
exactly.
Which Stranger Things is built around.
I consider Stranger Things an 80s show.
I 100% do.
Even though it's
100%.
not.
Yes, agreed.
But you forget that the Turtles aren't really that much older than the Stranger Things kids. It's just they've had a totally different life experience. So you can build it from that as to how it works. There's so many different variables as to how you can get the Ninja Turtles to actually work with anyone. Like if you told me, there's the TMNT and I don't know, Wolverine crossover or Spider-Man or
it would work.
Right? Like I can't think of a single TMNT crossover off the top of my head that wouldn't work with someone.
No.
I mean, Bikers from Mars, it'd work.
That would work.
Transformers, that'd work. Terminator, I can see that work. Yeah.
Going back to the Turtles, we were talking about they're not that much older than the Stranger Things kids. That was one of the reasons I love the new Seth Rogen movie.
Oh my God, that movie was absolutely stellar.
Brilliant.
They did a great job because they were teens, but they weren't. They're usually depicted as like older teens. They were depicted as younger teens.
Straight up teens, yeah.
So they were 13, 14, 15. It was just different atmosphere, different vibe. And
the voice cast was brilliant, the way that they depicted them. I can't wait for the Tales of the TMNT Netflix series that branches off from that. That comes out in a couple months.
Oh, really? I know that.
Oh, yeah. That starts in a couple months, and it takes place from the Mutant Mayhem universe. Now, I don't know if it's like a bridge to Mutant Mayhem 2 or whatever they're going to call the movie, but it is straight after where the Turtles, spoiler if anyone hasn't seen it, it did come out last year, sorry. After they go to high school, which I also thought was a great choice that has never been done before, is these guys yearn to be and belong with other kids. And to have them show up at the end in high school, dressed in button downs and like be accepted. It was just so brilliant. And it's just like, it's fun when you see other people, like, again, we'll go back to the sandbox and they're just like, well, this is how I would play with it. And they just, sometimes they make something that's magical. And sometimes they make something that's terrible, like Michael Bay's movies. Oh, that was so brutal.
I had fun with those for what they were.
Did you? Oh man.
You know what it was? I watched it. It was a family affair. So it was like a Friday movie night. I had my young kids and my wife, and I wasn't looking for like a compelling story. I was looking for ridiculous turtles action with CGI. And there's one point I forget if it's the first movie or the second movie, but being from New York, I have a good understanding of the surrounding area.
Yeah.
And they said they drove like 30 minutes outside the city, and then they get on this incredible action sequence where they're going down a hill and they're sliding.
Oh yeah, that's the first movie.
And it lasts like 30 minutes. And I said, there's no place in New York City 30 minutes away where you can go down a mountain for this long and not hit something. It doesn't exist. But I just was so into the moment because it was cool to look at.
Yeah. I mean, it was visually, honestly, some of the designs were really cool choices. But like, I like Stephen Amell. I was a big Arrow fan for a while, and then it just, all CW shows seem to just go on too long, and they don't know when to cut it. So I was excited when he was cast as Casey Jones. I'm like, man, we're gonna get a badass Casey Jones. He sucked the bag. It was brutal how bad he was as Casey Jones. He couldn't be more vanilla. It was awful. Like, I was like, man, what are you doing? Who wrote this? But it was nice to see Bebop and Rocksteady.
Yeah, that was the second. The second movie got really wacky with Craig.
Wow, it was awful.
It was wacky, but yeah, visual. It was all about the visuals.
Yeah.
My only real complaint with that movie was how they did Shredder at the end in a mech suit.
Oh, I hated that.
I wasn't a fan of that.
I hated that.
But other than that, like I remember the movie ending. I'm like, I actually enjoyed that. I can understand why some folks wouldn't enjoy it. But for me, and I watched it on streaming or something.
Yeah.
And when I see something on streaming, I consider I watched it for free because I'm not paying to see that specific thing. So I watched it free and enjoyed it.
Yeah, that's the way I look at it. If I had paid and sat in a theater and dedicated like 2 hours of my day to do something, but I was at home with my kids, so they kept watching. I went into the kitchen and got something to eat. So
yeah,
you can't really do that in a theater.
No, funny enough, so I saw Monkey Man on Thursday, by the flick by Dev Patel. There were two of us in the theater, so if one of us did want to get up and go get something to eat, it wouldn't have bothered the other one in any way, shape, or form.
You could have been like, "Hey, you bring me back something."
Hey, can I give you some money and you can get me some more popcorn? Good movie though. If you haven't thought about seeing it, it's a good movie.
So, outside of comic books, outside of that medium, like for entertainment of any type, I already said I'm a big Sopranos fan, so I love mob movies and stuff. Like, what are your other interests? Like, what other like mediums or like entertainment grab you? You're clearly, I think you must be a gamer to some level because you mentioned Halo 3 and Solid Snake, so like you have to be a gamer.
Yeah, I play a lot of games.
Okay.
I'm a huge Final Fantasy guy. I love.
Nice.
I'm big on Assassin's Creed. I'm an Assassin's Creed apologist right now.
So genuine question. I love the shit out of 1, 2. Was largely
3 I like.
I was largely indifferent to 3 because I didn't like the wilderness, how much of a part that played in it. Although I understand why it did for the story. I just preferred assassins being in the cities. I thought that was more of that was just more of what I was looking for. I love Black Flag. Black Flag is ironically not in a city, but it's the pirate aspect of it. I would play an entire game just of that.
I think Black Flag is the best game in the series.
Yeah,
It just so they found a way. So they toyed around with the naval aspect in 3, and they said, and I don't know how they developed it, but it's like they took that limited part of the game and they said, let's just make an entire game out of this. And it was very good. It was very
Yeah.
cool. Edward Kenway is just this cool, badass pirate that just goes around and he just has a good demeanor about him. And it was fun looting and pillaging ships. And I've enjoyed all of them. I might not have enjoyed some as many as others, but I was a huge Metal Gear Solid fan growing up. I was a huge Halo fan growing up. And at some point, those franchises lost me. The story got too far away from what I liked it from it. And Assassin's Creed hasn't done that yet. And it's been over a decade, well over a decade.
Yeah.
And I gobble up every single installment, and I love the universe, and I love the characters. And I'm a big stealth guy. I love, like I said, Metal Gear Solid. I love Splinter Cell and those type of espionage, sneaking around. One person against an entire army, but not taking them on head on. I just like those games.
So you must have loved GoldenEye 64 because I used to love that game. That was like my jam.
They just remastered it, and I don't know if it's on every platform, but it's on Xbox Game Pass. I played it, and I loved asking my kids if they wanted to play multiplayer and just dominating them.
Yeah, I just, to me, there's nothing more. That was like it. Alex, we talked about this. You were very good at GoldenEye.
Yeah, I remember me and my friend, well, my two really good friends at the time. They're both called Alan, and the middle name was the same as well. So that, and of course, between the three of us, we just, hey Al, hey Al, hey Al. We all know who we were talking to. Anyway, so we would play GoldenEye every weekend for hours. And when you play something that long against someone who's as good as you don't realize how
good you are.
How good you are.
Yeah.
And so we've been playing for like all summer, all winter, and all summer again at this point. So we've been playing it a lot. Played Perfect Dark a lot. Ended up sticking to the GoldenEye maps because they were the best ones, and then went back to GoldenEye back and forth. Someone brought in an N64 into our school in like the sixth form common area, and they were doing GoldenEye, and it's like the idea was, when you die, you pass the controller around. Right. So there were 30 people in this room, and as I walk in, my friend who he'd been there for about half an hour. I'm like, how's it going? Like, Alan just keeps killing everyone. It's insane. I'm like, oh, can I have the controller? Yeah. So I kill him. And he's just chuckling away because now he just gets to watch. And they're like, oh, how'd you do that? I'm like, oh, I got lucky, I guess. I went through the entire room twice until they told me I'm not allowed to use guns anymore.
3 hours later.
Yeah, I still went through the room until Alan got the controller back. And at that point, I'm not allowed to use guns, but he is. And he's as good as me, if not like better on some maps. I'm like, there's no way I can win this because he's going to know where I am and everything.
Right.
So I still try to do my best and I almost get him, but
that's a funny story.
Yeah, and of course we played it on the settings that Alan and I liked it on, so licensed to kill pistols. So it was already unfair for everyone else at that point. But
so I'll take the opposite stance on this. Like, I'm not great at the first person shooter games, and I'm even like far behind like my friends. Like
I'm terrible now. Like I haven't played.
Oh my!
I haven't played competitive
Halo was
multiplayer like that for a long time.
When Halo 3 came out, because it was just, I was murked all the time. I was like, okay, this is not fun. But then when like Mortal Kombat games come out, I'm like, thank God I can do something here. Like, you know what I mean? I'm at least in the running with Mortal Kombat, so it's cool.
Talking about Mortal Kombat, I remember when I was in college, one of the big games that came out we had a blast with was the DC Mortal Kombat game.
Oh, I remember that. Yeah, that was wild when that first like actually came out, and like I wasn't reading Game Informer or anything like that. I don't even know if Game Informer existed back then.
Probably some form of it would have done.
Yeah, but like it was such a shock to me when like I was walking through GameStop, and all of a sudden DC Mortal Kombat. I was like, the what? It was like peanut butter and jelly. I'm like, how do I not pick up this game? I'm a diehard DC guy. It was so cool.
I love
loved it.
now that the Mortal Kombat games they have campaigns with stories, and as a story guy, I love those. And they came up with some bizarre way to level out the playing field so that like Joker can fight Superman.
I know.
It was just cool the way they made it work, and it was fun.
I always wondered how, because I never played that, but I always wondered how exactly can you conceivably have Joker fight Superman?
They came up with some story device.
Yeah.
Level it out.
It's like depower. You know, like certain characters will have like red sun gauntlets or something like that just to depower Superman and like put him on a different level. But like Injustice and Injustice 2, I liked Injustice 2 a lot, like because just like the sequences of, you know, like the power-ups and stuff, you're like, wow, this is pretty rad. This is really,
especially
really
I love the character intros when they come and they address the character. These are like new things that when I first started playing a fighting game, I remember playing the original Mortal Kombat on my Game Gear, and I'm like, where can they take this format next? And yet somehow, like they X-ray attacks and knocking people through walls. It's the stage switches. Like they always find some way to keep it fresh.
And it's really cool. Now, I didn't play Mortal Kombat 1. It's the only one I haven't played yet, and I need to get it. I've heard good things. I've heard bad things. But again, fan bases are fickle. It's just, as a wrestling fan, I know this so well. As a Star Wars fan, I know this even better. Like, there is nothing more toxic than a Star Wars fan base if you give it long enough. It is brutal. Like, I mean, you're supposed to love this stuff. You don't tear it down, but everyone tears it down. And it's just, you know, listen, I don't believe in tribalism of any kind. I think there's room for all different things. Like, you know, again, back to wrestling, you got WWE, you got AEW. I mean, this anti-tribalism things existed forever. There's room for so much. You got Burger King and you got McDonald's. Both make freaking hamburgers. Both are pretty good in their own right if, you know, you're in for that. But like they coexist. You can have them both. I don't subscribe to this. DC's better than Marvel. No, I would love DC and Marvel to be able to cross over again like they did in the 90s. I loved DC and Marvel. Hell, I even liked the amalgam issues, you know, like because it was like, oh, you're taking my two favorite things and finally letting them meet. And like the fact that now let's segregate them like, you know, a semi-formal dance with awkward teenagers is ridiculous. Like just let them play.
My big thing is when they revamp a franchise, and we were talking about Turtles. Turtles, they've done this.
Yeah.
There's a Turtles for every generation.
Absolutely. IDW has done a great job, and they're wrapping up that version of the Turtles next month. And I think, as a Mirage guy, I loved the original Mirage Turtles. That's when I first got introduced to Turtles. One of the first comic books I ever had, my dad got it when I was 2, was 1984 TMNT #1. Like I was reading at a very early age, but my dad would read to me, and like I just loved the Turtles. I was introduced to them in black and white for multiple years before they became, you know, the Fred Wolf cartoon show.
Yeah, but they have the comics Turtles, then they've had many iterations of the cartoon Turtles that have nothing to do with the comics.
Right, Rise of the TMNT, no.
Yeah.
No.
But they, for some reason, there's this fan base that whenever they come up with a new version that's supposed to be for that generation, they feel it's like an attack on their version.
Right, and it's not, because they both exist. If you don't like it, don't read it, watch it, whatever.
It's like it's not for you.
I know, you're right.
It's bizarre. It's like going into a clothing store that sells women clothing. You're like, I don't like these designs. Be like, you're not supposed to buy them.
It's
just
a
bizarre.
really good way to put it.
Yeah, like I'm wearing a Donald Duck t-shirt. That might not be for everyone. That's fine. Honestly, I have so many Donald Duck shirts at this point in my life. I'm surprised I have room for anything else. But
you know what it might be? It might be a consequence of internet culture a little bit. Is that people feel like their opinion is more valued than it should be or is.
Yeah,
so
of course.
If people don't like something, they want to hoot and holler and they want everybody to listen to them. How the Turtles they look like childish cartoons. Be like, well, it
Yeah.
is a childish cartoon.
Yeah.
So
The only gripe I have, and it's a valid one, and I don't know your age base, Frank. I know Alex's, but it's like this freaking wave of just awesome stuff from all the properties and everything that I adored as a kid in, middle school and high school. It the peak, the apex hit 10 years too late. Because had it hit 10 years earlier, I would have been one of the most popular kids in school. But I missed that damn boat so bad. Like, I mean, comics were not cool. People would you couldn't wear a comic book t-shirt. You couldn't wear that. People were like, oh my God, it's so ridiculous, so stupid. And I see these same people later in the convention circuit. Some I've even went to high school with, and they're like, man, you can't believe you love this stuff. I'm like, yeah, I loved it for 20 plus years, but you were an ass back then.
Piggybacking off of that concept, my
Yeah.
gripe with that is that where were all these hot chicks dressing up as superhero
Oh my God,
characters
I
when I was in
know,
high school?
right?
No
I
hot
know.
girls like superheroes or
None,
Star Wars.
none, never, never, ever. It is
Now they're
so.
look at me. I'm dressing up as Electro. Be like, why now?
Why now? Why when now when I'm gonna get in trouble for looking at you? It's ridiculous, man. I mean, I was salty when I first started doing the convention circuit, like back in 2015, because that's Alex, that's when you and I started first talking. I
Yeah,
was
that's
so
true.
pissed. I'll never forget. I had to get over it. I was so pissed when the first Deadpool movie came out because I have loved Deadpool since 1991, and I've been singing praises about Deadpool forever and ever, especially when Joe Kelly came on and redid Wade Wilson from a boring mercenary and gave him the fourth wall breaking heart that he has now. And when Deadpool came out, the movie, everyone was a Deadpool fan, and everyone was like, "Oh, he's the greatest thing ever." I'm like, dude, you know how popular this book would have been 10 years ago, 15
Do,
years ago, if all you people existed, but you didn't.
do you know what's even funnier than that? So when the Deadpool movie came out, we didn't notice a single increase in single issue comics from Deadpool.
Right? Why would you? Because it wasn't. It's like Guardians of the Galaxy. I don't care.
That
We've gone over this many, many times.
yeah,
No one liked the Guardians of the
no,
Galaxy.
we
No
we
one.
we definitely saw a couple of increases of trades, but for the most part, that was a very quick thing, and then it was done. It was we never really
Yeah.
saw the increase that we were expecting to. I mean, that anyone was expecting to see. Really, it just didn't really happen.
Yeah, Frank, can you experience this when you were a kid? How many people, when you were playing with your friends, you're like, I'll be Batman, I'll be Superman. Do you remember how many kids raised their hand and were like, I'll be Ant-Man?
I'll be Star Lord.
Never.
Did
Never.
anyone even know who Star Lord was at that time?
No, no one. That's why that line in the movie when he's like, I'm the Star-Lord, and he's like, who? I'm like, yeah, every fan ever up until James Gunn.
Yeah,
Every fan ever.
Being in the comics industry, one
Mhm.
of our biggest complaints is how badly they have not capitalized on the film success, translated that into comic success.
I agree. Well, I mean, it's definitely a more popular comic book now than it
It,
was in the Jim Starlin days. But
I'm just talking about comics as a whole,
oh, okay, yeah,
like everything. So, I mean, obviously there has been a little bumps here and there, but for as much as Marvel is beloved,
yeah.
people, I don't know, people love sitting down on the couch watching movies, but they don't like going to the comic shop and buying a
But
book.
I also think that's going to come back around because we've had such an oversaturation of the MCU. I was all for it. I remember when WandaVision first came out. I loved it. I thought it was brilliant. As a big fan of Bewitched and those sitcoms back then, I thought it was a greatly told story. It was very intelligent. It was just cool. But then when you got to She-Hulk, who is a fourth wall breaking character who I really, really like, it just was like, no, this isn't for me. And then Echo, no. And this Marvel, no. And then you have the movie The Marvels, which is just, it's a marvel if you can make it through that movie. And it's just it's bad. You had the Eternals, and it's not everything with the Marvel logo is top tier. And I think that's why it's so important to keep the comic books going. You know, the best stuff that's on the screen is the stuff that is really faithful to the source material. That's why Deadpool works so well, because it was so faithful to the source
It,
material as far
it
as
doesn't
like the
even have to be
concept.
faithful to the source material, but
It doesn't
faithful
have to
to
be
the
faithful
spirit of
as
the character.
story. Yes, like not story beats. You don't have to tell a story word for word because I've already read it.
It
But you
needs to be
do have to
faithful to the spirit of the characters, is how I would.
Yes, Alex is
Yeah.
exactly perfect the way he put it. But Frank, so I mean, it must be very fun to play in your own universe all the time because you are like the grand master. You can do whatever you want, move whatever piece. But if somebody came to you and was like, "Hey, man, any comic book character that currently exists, it's yours if you want, a run. Who would you take and why?"
So this is a two-part answer.
Yep.
The first part is my Mount Everest that I've always wanted to write ever since I was a kid
Hmm.
is Spider-Man.
Okay.
As we've talked about this a little bit, I'm terrified to write Spider-Man.
Hmm.
Zeb Wells is getting destroyed online. So
Yeah.
it seems like such a burdensome task to try to
Yeah.
contribute to that mythology that even though I would love doing it and I've imagined doing it so much,
Hmm.
there's just so much spotlight on it. And I would much rather take a B or a C character and
Okay.
give them life. So if I had a choice and with like zero stakes, I don't know if you were familiar with this character. I would love to use Gravity.
Gravity. I
Gravity
don't.
is a Marvel superhero.
Yeah.
He's kind of like a Spider-Man guy.
Yeah.
He went to
Was he New
college.
Warriors?
He might have been in New Warriors,
I think it
but
was
he was
New
a
Warriors.
super minor guy. But when I read his first series, he was brand new. I connected with him because he was a kid who had superpowers. He went to college in New York City, and
Yeah.
he's like, I'm gonna be a superhero. And he realized he was in over his head, and
Yeah.
I connected with that. And I was like, I would love to give this character more of a spotlight because he's super powerful,
Right.
and just doing that, like trying to make my mark on a character that nobody knows, I feel is
Mhm.
would just be so much more rewarding than just contributing another Spider-Man story, you know?
That's really cool. That's really cool.
And if I
Yeah.
would move up the ladder on those characters, probably
Hmm.
Sentry. I love the Sentry as a character.
Mm.
Yeah. He's
A lot
so much potential.
people have a lot of a hate-love relationship with him,
Yeah.
but the thing is he's so weird and so out there, you can do so much with him.
Well, the
So
void. Like, I mean, it's just the perfect, like, Jekyll Hyde. It's just so good,
yeah.
and
He's
you could
very
do a lot with him.
versatile.
Yeah.
Jeff Meyer did a great story. I think there's a new Century series. I'm not sure if it's out, but I saw it announced. He's just when
There
I
is a Century series.
I grew up in that Bendis Millar era
Hmm.
when
Yeah.
Century was heavily used, and so I loved seeing his journey from New Avengers to Dark Avengers to then
Yeah.
seeing.
Yeah.
So I thought that was a great run
Well,
of
I
book.
just remember, I think it was issue 2 of New Avengers. They just ripped Carnage in half. They brought him up in space and just tore him in half. I was like, whoa. That
Yeah.
was just wild to see
that
that.
was that was viewed as such like a metaphorical death of 90s comics. Like this is
Hmm.
something new that we're doing here, which was
It's funny though. Like, I guess it's just, nostalgia is the greatest drug that ever existed. And like, I go back to 90s comics all the time. Like, when I think of my memories of like what the greatest comics are for me, and maybe it's a little weird. I mean, yeah, there's some great stuff that's out now. Absolutely. Like New 52, Snyder and Capullo's Batman run is one of my all-time faves. Grant Morrison's run on Batman is my all-time fave. But like, for stories and beats, like Nightfall, I love Nightfall. I love Azrael, as over the top and crazy as it was. Jean Paul Valley as a psycho Batman was awesome. Superman fighting Doomsday in all splash pages in Superman 75 remains my favorite single issue comic of all time. Like, I'm a 90s guy with the over the top pouches. You had Cable, you had the X-Men, the Jim Lee run. Like, it's just endless. And every time we get a story, like, on a screen told from these new characters, what did they pull from? They pull from the 90s usually for a reason. Because maybe the storytelling and the complexity wasn't super nuanced, but the memories they created from like the situations and pitfalls these characters faced, they're iconic. They go on forever. Like, what have you done to Superman besides kill him that was ever as big? Nothing. Seriously.
Yeah, Superman's another hard character to write because
I would kill to write.
He's Superman, There's nothing
Superman.
he can't do.
The best I've seen him written was Grant Morrison's Superman, All-Star Superman. I thought it was.
I haven't read a whole lot of Superman. This might not be a popular answer, but I was just a big fan of Alan Moore's Whatever Happened to the Man of Tomorrow. Is that what it's called?
That's one of the that was the end of Action Comics. That was the end of that first run. It was Whatever Happens to the Man of Tomorrow, where Lois was like penning her last days, remembering what happened to Superman.
Yeah, it was like Superman The End if it was in Marvel. So
it was great.
I thought he did a good job with that.
Yeah, and then Alan Moore also did For the Man Who Has Everything. That's one of his best stories too, with Superman.
I got to read that one. I'm a big Alan Moore
fabulous. Fan. So you must like Alan Moore Swamp Thing.
That's why I own every single volume of it. It's like 12 volumes.
So that would be a character I would love to write. I would love to write, like if I ever had the choice. I mean, if I ever had a choice, you know what? Be damned what it is. Internet could hate me. Give me Batman now. Just I would do it. But
that's a notch on the belt that's like that'll be there forever.
but I would do it. But like if I had a chance, I love the lesser characters. Like I'd like to write a run of Dr. Fate or the Spectre or Deadman. Deadman would be one I'd really sink my teeth into. That would be a great one.
I really enjoyed the New 52 Phantom Stranger.
Yeah.
And that was so that I never read anything else with the character, but it made me like him enough that I was like, I'd like to give this guy a shot. But yeah, I'm a big Swamp Thing guy. I love Man Thing too. I wrote a Man Thing fan fiction, short prose story that what I did was I just took Man Thing out and I just made a generic swamp monster and I released it to my audience. But my buddy's he's producing a big Batman fan comic. And he nagged me a lot to do a fan comic myself. So I'm like, all right, fine. So I wrote, I think 4 or 5 pages of a Swamp Thing script, and I'm having an artist draw it. So, I mean, I talk a lot with other comic creators, and we're kind of like, fan comics are just a way to say, we're just going to do this. Like, we don't have to, we're comic creators. We don't have to sell everything we make. If we're able to produce something at low cost that with the characters we enjoy and release it, like we're able to do that. So I'm looking forward to putting out a Swamp Thing comic.
Absolutely. And I don't know what we all have for time, but I'm game to keep going. But I wanted to ask you, who was your biggest writing influence? Because obviously you're a writer. Who was your biggest writing influence when you were younger and when you got into all this?
I'm not a big fan of this question. I get it a lot.
Sorry. I know,
when I was a kid, I didn't read a whole lot. Even now, I don't read a whole lot. I mean, there's tons of writers that I love, but I bounce around between so many different genres. It's hard to pinpoint.
You can be a comic book writer.
Like an influence. Growing up as a kid, I loved Goosebumps books. I read a bazillion of those.
R.L. Stine? Okay.
Yeah, I watched a whole lot of Are You Afraid of the Dark, which again,
I love Are You Afraid of the Dark.
It bounced so. You know what? When people ask me like, what's your foundational inspiration? I consumed Are You Afraid of the Dark like no one else. And when I look back
at Midnight Society,
so when I look back at all of the work that I've produced, I can see Are You Afraid of the Dark as a foundation for that, because even though it's primarily a horror show, it spanned so many different genres and tones. You had comedy, you had fantasy, you had sci-fi, you had like slasher horror and supernatural horror. It was just,
you had like Twilight Zone mixed in there. You had a lot of stuff. Yeah.
It did not limit its storytelling. So I think that's why I loved it so much. And I think that's why I love scary horror movies, and I love Star Trek, and I love watching Dungeons and Dragons and Game of Thrones. Like, I love all of these things because I was so exposed to all of these things through Are You Afraid of the Dark?
Game of the Thrones for me was the biggest culture shock when it first. Now it's passe because everyone does it. But I'll never forget watching Game of Thrones the first season when my buddy introduced me to it when it was brand new and it was like live and it was happening. He was like, we were like 3 episodes behind, and like he was like, dude, you got to go back and watch this show. And I'm like, what? It's just Dungeons and Dragons. He's like, yeah, but you love this stuff. And I was like, yeah. What more can they do? I mean, honestly, I'm like, I've seen everything, and I'll never forget when they killed Ned Stark, who I just like imprinted on like a baby bird. I'm like, that's my guy. Love him so much.
Like, screw
They
you.
lop his
Fucking
head
kill
off,
your
and
favorite
I was
character.
like,
The fact that he was
He's
played by Sean Bean should have given you some clue.
like, antagonist. He's the character. He's the guy. They just killed him. Who else am I gonna like? And it was just that. There was many moments throughout that show, but like that was the one that stuck with me. I was like, holy crap! I didn't see that coming.
It's very difficult to kill off a main character and keep a show going.
Oh wow, it was.
It's
bold.
very difficult, and they managed to do it for at least a couple more seasons.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
and then you had the Red Wedding, and I was
ironically,
like, cool.
ironically enough, when I was reading the books, I just about got to the end of the first book before that scene, and someone had spoiled the Red Wedding for me coming up in the next book. Like, oh, that sucks. Oh well,
man.
Ned's still here. And then I finished that book and Ned wasn't there. I'm like, I'm not super into this guy's style of writing. There's no characters that I really want to carry.
Oh, dude,
and
I know.
And I don't have a burning desire to finish. So I read the first book and never really read anything more about the first 50 pages of the second book just to see if it would hold my interest.
Yeah.
And, I'm happy for the folks that really enjoy it, but his Martin's writing style doesn't really jive with how I enjoy reading. So,
but what about the show? How did you take the show?
I enjoyed the show up until about the seasons where
last season was absolute dreck, and
the
editing,
last
like
two
the Aquafina bottles and Starbucks cups and the scenes that you can see, like they just didn't care.
I heard the rumor that the producers, the writers, I can't remember exactly what they were, but they wanted to go and do their Star Wars trilogy. So they rushed through the last 2 seasons, despite HBO saying, hey, you can have twice the amount of episodes, twice the budget to finish this off.
Oh, wow.
And they're like, oh, no, we'll do it in less. And we got what we got. And then the Star Wars thing, you know what? We're going to put a hiatus or put a pause on your trilogy because your resume took a bit of a hit with the last 2 seasons of Game of Thrones.
Yeah, winter was coming for 9 years, and then it lasted 45 minutes. The most cliche way of ending the Night King. Oh my God, it was so bad.
What annoyed me too was the terrible tactics in that battle. Like, anyway, I could rant about that far too long. But
I thought that was a good question.
I actually forgot what the question was.
The question was, how much can Game of Thrones raise your blood pressure?
Oh,
yeah.
Significantly, apparently. Even to this day, significantly.
I think they misconstrued, and people that don't agree with me on this, they get kind of like angry when I say this, that I'm like, the Night King was the primary antagonist, and they're like, no, Cersei was all along. I'm like,
the Night
no,
King was the thing that they built to from the opening scene.
Yeah, like, no, she's not. Like, there was a lot that they didn't. They had so much potential to connect a lot of things, and they didn't do that. They kept these stories separate for some reason, and it just, I don't know. I enjoy watching it end simply because
it's over.
Like, yeah, kinda. It's like if you're on a road trip for 12 days.
Yeah.
You're tired at the end, but that last 30 minutes where you finally get to your destination, you're like, we're here.
It was it was such botched, terrible writing though at the end. It really bothered me deeply.
And they never even got to do their Star Wars stuff, right? Didn't that fall through?
Rightfully so, and I hope they never do.
It fell through. The rumor I heard is it fell through because of how Game of Thrones ended.
Oh, good. Irony.
Yeah,
good.
They rushed through it to get to it, and because they rushed through it, I think
Oh,
the
well.
fear was that if they lost interest after the second movie, they'll rush the third, and it'll bomb. So why take the risk on it?
What a treasure we would have missed. I mean, if it's anything like Needle taking down the Night King. Oh my God, I was so
I actually
furious.
I didn't hate that. I just
Yeah,
hated the fact it
so
happened when
very
it did.
much.
Like I feel like there's so much more you could have done to
Yeah,
pull that story apart over
it
multiple
was
episodes.
they wanted to wrap it up.
Yeah.
Oh, it was
They
very
didn't do the writing legwork, it seemed. And also that
Oh,
episode was so dark. I agreed with a lot of people's interpretation. Like I couldn't see half of the dragon battle.
no, yeah. It was like the Batman for a whole episode, but the Batman was done brilliantly. This was
I
like, oof.
watched the final I watched the final season. We would always go to our friend's house and we watch it.
Yeah,
We know there's no other lights on in the room, and even we were struggling to see it in a room with no other light other than the
yeah,
TV with the brightness turned up. You're like, I mean, this is cool, but if there was any
yeah.
other light source in this room, you wouldn't see that TV.
Like, I think that's a lesson to everyone, and even a lesson to you, Frank. You can have the hottest thing going, but man, is it hard to stick the landing. Like my dad used to always say, you're only as good as your last shift. And it's like very true because, you know, I'm sure you're a Jets or, a Giants fan, but I'm diehard Patriots, greatest dynasty ever, cough, cough. But Bill Belichick's going to be remembered for crap 2 seasons that was so brutal. Like it's just nothing great lasts forever, and it's
I'm
hard
a-
to.
I'm actually a Tampa Bay Buccaneers fan. So,
Okay, so you
but you
had
know what?
Tommy come down to win you
The
a ring, which
story
I was
still
very happy.
the story still applies. Tom Brady retired
Greatest,
one
greatest
season
ever.
too late. You know,
Yep, yep.
he could have. It would have been brilliant if he just played one season on a different team in the middle of
Yeah,
COVID, won the Super Bowl while playing at the home field, somebody no other team has ever done.
yeah.
He could have gone out on top, and then he decided to play like 2 more seasons after that, or one more.
One more season,
One
one
more
more.
season.
And they almost made it. They
Yeah,
got knocked out right at the
yeah,
NFC Championship.
but he didn't make it, and he got divorced, and
Yeah,
it was like one year made such a difference.
it was like it was like an operatic tragedy. It was like him and Bill Belichick. Like when they won their 6th ring with the Patriots, that should have been the swan song. That should have been it. It should have been like the mic drop. And Tom Brady's like, nah, I can go do this again. And kudos to him. He won it the next year. He got 7 rings. He worked on his second Infinity Gauntlet. But like Bill Belichick got left in the dust and hobbled team. Oh my God. And now it's like, I'm going to probably not see a ring for a very long time the way the Patriots are. It's very rough. But
It's
I was a
it,
Bucks fan for 1 year. No, 2 years. I was a diehard Bucks fan. I had that Brady jersey immediately.
it's hard when you're on top to
Yeah.
retire the throne. George,
Right.
our great one, people consider George Washington one of our greatest presidents because they're like he could just continue to be elected every year. Everybody loves him, and he was like,
Yep.
"No, I'm going to go out on top. I had my two terms,
Mhm.
and peace out." So there's a reason people like him.
Exactly. But speaking of going out on top and not lingering on, I don't really have any much more to add. This has been absolutely great. Seriously, this is.
Mhm.
I can't remember the last time I've been. Well, I've always been talkative, but like this much back and forth with a guest. This was really
Well,
a treat.
I'm glad this is a great start to a 420 Saturday.
Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely
no
is.
shit. That's right. I just looked at the calendar.
Did you not pick it up when we were talking about it earlier?
Dude, no, I picked it up. Listen, I was out and I'm
It's
old.
been a late night.
It's late. It was a very late
So
night.
you know how you were saying about going out on top, and now all of a sudden it's coming around. Like,
Yeah,
oh, I missed
yeah,
this thing. Ah, nuts.
So we do this all the time. Alex, I'll let you take us out.
Yeah, folks, if you want to check out Frank's stuff, there's a ton of free stuff on his website, comics, short stories. It's franktherwriter.com.
Oh, thank you. I didn't need to do any of that.
Oh, no, you don't have to do it.
No, but we will gladly plug anything you ever want. Just reach
absolutely.
out to us and we'll do it off air, on air, whatever you want.
Whatever you need.
I appreciate that, guys. Thank you.
You'll be able to find Frank's contact info in the show notes if you go and look there. Twitter, you're at Frank the Writer. Frank the Writer on Instagram, and also on Facebook. So it's nice and consistent, which is what we like for us simple folks who struggle to remember things.
I did that for myself because so I don't have to remember.
Hey, you could just take the credit that you did it for other people. That's totally fine. Any last words? Any last thoughts before we sign off?
No, this was a lot of fun, guys. Thank you for having me.
You are more than welcome. At this point, you're probably hearing the music play, so we will let you enjoy that, and we'll catch you next time. This is that awkward bad.
Hey, thanks for watching the previous video from Graphic Policy Television. Just by watching, you help support our site. Thank you so much. Now, if you're watching these videos, you probably care about geeky things like movies, television, comic books, toys, games, video games, you name it. You can go and subscribe right now to our YouTube channel to stay in touch and catch all the new videos, or check out our website at graphicpolicy.com. There's a nice link on this end of the video. But as always, thank you for watching. Keep on rocking and keep it geeky.